John Rich had a few things to say about the Scofield Bible, which I thought was absolutely amazing.
What you're saying is the Scofield Bible, its theology is deceptive.
A very wealthy, very charismatic preacher named John Darby came with this doctrine that's now referred to as the secret rapture or the pre-tribulation rapture. And guess who he was connected to, by the way? The Rothschilds.
Interesting.
Have you ever heard of a Scofield Bible?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so C.I. Scofield was basically a student of John Darby, and he adopted that part of the doctrine, and he incorporated that into the Bible. It was the first Bible ever made that had study notes with it. It became so popular, every Christian was reading it, every minister was reading it, including me, including my own father. For a long time, that's what we believed too. But when you start actually going back and reading line by line by line what is said that will be leading up to Jesus coming back, which is when the rapture happens, it's the inverse of what John Darby put down.
My sense was the Scofield stuff, which has had massive implications for our foreign policy, for example, and in our domestic politics, was probably a lie. I do know that translation or that commentary on the Bible has had massive effects on our politics that have been very, very negative and resulted in the deaths of a lot of people.
Wow. That is huge. Guys, John Rich, I don't know. He's correct on a lot of things. Not correct on his interpretation of Bible prophecy, of course. The Remnant Church has that understanding. But what he says about the Scofield Bible, some of it at least, is actually correct.
Right.
What are your understanding on this Scofield Bible's idea?
Yeah, I agree with him. He's right that their interpretation of prophecy, most Christians, a lot of Christians nowadays, their view of Israel comes from that Bible. But also, interestingly enough, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe their view of this, things such as a secret rapture and futurism also comes from the same Bible as well. So it was interesting that he referenced the secret rapture, but he doesn't notice that that's also unbiblical. So hopefully, as he is bringing this out, more people will do more research and study into that version and discover, like, wait a minute, there's a lot about this Bible that's incorrect and inconsistent with other versions. And so, but he is right on that. It has had a huge impact and influence on our country's foreign policy and the role of Israel in end time events.
Yeah. Thank you for that one. I was looking for this presentation here. I have it on my list. It's called The Counter-Reformation. Like, the thing about it, true versus a counter-revival, mark of the beast, a counter-argument. Anyway, we can do that another day. The thing about the Counter-Reformation, when I've actually looked into it and what happened with Francisco Ribera and Luis de Alcalá, they brought these two interpretations, preterism and futurism. The Scofield Bible adapted the futurism view, but it wasn't like you cannot say the Jesuits created the secret rapture. It's kind of like what the outcome was as a result of accepting an interpretation of Bible prophecy that was incorrect. So the Scofield Bible is actually a very, very serious piece of document. Okay, I found at least something that I can share. Let me open this up. There we go here. So this is going to give you maybe a quick picture of how we got here. And what Dr. Carlson says is actually correct. What he says is that this has had implication on U.S. policies. That interpretation of the Bible from Scofield alone with the secret rapture and their interpretation of where the Jewish faith is and who the Antichrist is and all of that, there's a lot of money being funded through politics because of that interpretation. So this is, shout out to James Bowen for this one. This is the idea. Francisco Ribera gave that understanding of futurism. It was meant to counter the Reformation because they didn't want the Catholic Church to be identified as the Antichrist of Bible prophecy anymore. So that was an effort. It was a Jesuit agenda. So you can see the dates by here. So from there, it passed down by Cardinal Bellarmine, who also took it and gave it to Manuel Lucanza. Manuel Lucanza also was a teacher of Edward Irvin. Edward Irvin passed it to Henry Drumden, and John Nelson Darby took it. The Scofield Bible also spread it, and Samuel Udemer also spread the whole idea as well. So we have the Scofield Bible, Samuel Udemer, and these men also began to establish the Madison School, where the idea from the secret rapture, what's his name, Tim LaHaye, took the whole idea of the secret rapture and spread it. It became a big discussion on many schools and even churches as well. So what you see going on in American politics, just like he said, a lot of what is being driven this is Scofield Bible. If you notice in American politics, you can't say nothing against the Jews. Like certain schools now will get hushed, and there are some people that are promoting things that I would say I don't agree with when they are supporting Hamas and stuff like that. And we can understand, and if they come on a student visa and stuff, you're not allowed to, get involved in this political discussion and supporting and going against the same country in which you're studying from. I can understand the nature of that argument, but sometimes that goes a little bit too far as well. And the reason that is almost like if you say anything against the Jewish faith today, even the political side of Judaism, like that is a problem. The reason behind that is the interpretation of the Scofield Bible. The idea of building a third temple, that's the Scofield Bible. The idea that we are going to have Antichrist, a physical Antichrist, one man Antichrist in the future, sitting in Jerusalem, that's a Scofield Bible. There's a whole idea about the red heifer sacrifice. There's a big discussion about this idea as well. That's from the Scofield Bible. The pre-Advent, rapture, the mid-trib, and the post-trib.
The pre-trib.
That's also Scofield Bible. So, and when you actually look into it, not only is this the mentality of many of Protestant evangelical churches, and again, it's a false doctrine. It's totally false. And John Rich is 100% correct. But also, U.S. politics. There's bloodshed. There are the ways we fund. I'm not saying I have an issue with Israel. That's not don't think this is anti-Semitic rhetoric. I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to say is the way politicians deal with Israel, their sensitivity, their mentality, their approach, their understanding to the nation of Israel today. As a nation, they still see it as God's people and everything like that. They don't see the spiritual element that's been done. But nevertheless, it is because of the Scofield Bible. So it's not a small thing. It's not a small thing. It's a big thing, and it has serious implication on U.S. politics. If you want to understand why former president, current president are doing what they do with Israel, why Israel has so much of a say in U.S. politics, why they can fund this and do that. And like, if you want to understand the aspect of it, you have to go back to the Scofield Bible. It's actually a spiritual agenda. It's actually a theological reason why it is driven these policies. And once you understand what happened then you can escape a lot of the confusion that we now have. So it takes a little bit of Bible study, but that's pretty much what's going on.
Yeah, it's such a powerful delusion, unfortunately, that it's actually a bipartisan position. Yeah. And it's one of the few where you'll get both Democrats and Republicans on board with this. So that kind of shows you that how influential this actually is, that both sides of the aisle actually come together in agreement on this. They may differ in policies, but this is something that you see a united effort. So it's serious. It's very serious.
And it's interesting because when you think of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, both had opposing views. Mm-hmm. but eventually they had the same agenda and persecuted Jesus. Yeah. Which I find quite interesting. And so, it's interesting.
That's a good parallel as well. Yeah. Eventually, God's people, the faithful children of God, are gonna get caught right in the mid of the fire.
Yes.
You're gonna be hated of all nations for my name's sake. So we have to be careful with these groups. We have to understand there are people in those groups who love the Lord, no matter whether they are in the left or on the right. God's people can be found on both ends, but it's just that we want to be where Jesus is. That's where I want to be.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen. Mm-hmm.